You've come to the right place if you're looking to create, launch, and scale a high-value online training program. I'm your guide, Chris Badgett. I'm the co-founder of LifterLMS, the most powerful learning management system for WordPress. Stay to the end. I've got something special for you. Enjoy the show. Welcome back to the Education Entrepreneur Mentor Series. This is a 5-part series where we go over the 5 critical hats that you need to wear or have the skills contained within your team to find success as an education entrepreneur, somebody who's teaching online, building an online education company, coaching, or building an education-based business. Those 5 hats that need to be worn to cover the bases are becoming the expert, the entrepreneur, the teacher, the technologist, and the community builder. This is part 3. We're going to be getting into becoming the teacher. Enjoy this session with my business partner at LifterLMS, Jason Coleman, and make sure you check out all 5 parts of this series. Enjoy. In this session, we're going to talk about becoming the teacher, or instructional designer as it's known in the e-learning space. It's one thing to be an expert in some kind of subject matter, but the ability to teach, to coach, to design curriculum is an important part of being an education entrepreneur. Let's start our conversation around beginner's mind, which is a concept that comes from Zen Buddhism. And digging into that, I just want to touch on the idea that it's easy to lose touch with the learner, particularly if you've been in your subject matter expertise for a really long time. We've all talked to somebody who's an expert in something, and it's just going in one ear and out the other. It's just too advanced. One of the strategies I learned around how to work with this, I learned from an instructional designer named Julie Dirksen. She has this concept called shelf space. So as we learn and master our subject matter, our shelf space and our ability to hold concepts, frameworks, strategies, tactics, it just gets bigger. Whereas a beginner has a really small amount of shelf space because they're new to the subject matter. And if you don't accommodate for that, the learner just kind of gets overwhelmed, or there's too much jargon. And so some of the ways to kind of get past that, and it's also, by the way, called the expert's curse. So the expert just can't get out of their own head, and they've got their Library of Alexandria with lots of shelf space. But one way to think about it is imagine talking to a previous version of yourself. What would that look like? Like, you're really advanced in investing, but if you were talking to, the investor that you were 15 years ago, you probably would kind of streamline it down a little bit. And this is where this concept of minimum effective dose comes in. So it's not about like, let me pack my Library of Alexandria of knowledge into this content and just kind of give them everything. It's more like, what's the least amount that I could teach, explain concepts, potentially assignments, activities, and things to get them moving in the direction of expanding their shelf space. Julie also taught me the concept of spiral learning, which is the idea that you don't have to teach everything you know about a piece of a subject matter in one go. It's actually a lot better to, let's say there's like 10 key areas of a subject matter, to do kind of a spiral across those 10 key areas on like fundamental ideas. And then when you get back to, that first area, then you can expand on that a little bit. So instead of trying to go deep on like one aspect and take them from, elementary school to PhD, let's go elementary all the way around and start building. And it's kind of how the traditional grade system works. So at LifterLMS, as an example, one of our top performing lead generation tools and also new customer or user onboarding tools is our Quick Start course, which has somewhere around 30,000 people in it. And the concept behind that course is the idea that if I can only show people 5% of the most important aspects of the software, how to use it, how to set up the website, how to collect payments, create content and all that, what would I teach in that 5%? So the course content is in total probably about 30 minutes, even though if I were to teach everything that LifterLMS does, I might need like 5 hours to kind of go over everything, but that would be completely
or 5
overwhelming.
months.
Yeah.
I feel that. I think about that with my children too. I always had trouble with that. I have these very lofty ideas that I want to instill in them, but there's like a framework, like that shelf that's needed. Like you can't talk about this complicated subject until you build you have to meet the person where they're at when you're teaching them. And I think a tactic I've tried in some of the investing material I've done is like I want to be able to have someone watch me as I'm researching a stock and I'm taking all the notes and writing all the very complicated things I'm doing, and actually benefit from that, like go along on that journey with me. But there's like a list of like 20 things they have to know. So I actually like started with the endpoint and said, I want my students to be here. Like they understand, they can watch this whole video. They know everything that's going on. And they're like, okay, I can't share that video with them yet, but that gives me like the syllabus for, all the aspects. And I love the spiral thing. I think there's other versions of that too, where you learn something and then you learn more and more. And then it's like good to relearn that thing with like a different context. Like that was the easy version. There's all these, videos on YouTube. Does Vox Media do them or something? And it's whatever. It's like a symphony and 5 levels of difficulty, or like, that series is really good at like hammering that point of like, here's one way to understand it. And then there's another level of understanding it and another level of understanding the same thing. That idea of like going back to the basics. It's good to realize that like your students aren't as bored with like the basic information as you are. Like I was talking about the stock research, like that's what I do actually. And it's easy for me. I'm like, I do it anyway. I could just put the camera on and then share it. And it feels fun. And I would love to talk to people and engage on that level. But if I was really trying to educate folks, that's not going to work. Like they need to know the basics. And so it's good to keep teaching the basics and getting better at it. And some of the best teachers that we know, I think like Seth Godin, I think of Gary Vaynerchuk and Warren Buffett's kind of like his annual letters, like would often hammer home the same points. And if you follow these folks for a long time, you almost get bored of it too. You're like, this guy has like 3, tricks or 3 things that he teaches. And is that like, what do you call that? Like the mid-twit mind. So it's like, this guy only has 3 things he teaches, and it's like, that's so exciting. And then in the middle, it's like, he only has 3 things he teaches. And like, that's nothing. And then the expert is like, actually you only have like 1 or 3 things that you teach. And so, yeah, I think if you really dig into that, trying to educate folks, like educate the basics, like give the same talk over and over. I used to do more conferences and talks, and I would feel almost like a comedian. Like I did my set, it's recorded, peace out. Now I'm working on my next one. Like, and there was some part of me that felt bad if I gave the same talk more than once, but it doesn't really make sense because if you're going to a different conference, it's a totally different audience, and maybe like 10% is like folks who've seen it before. But also if you give the same talk over and over again, you can make it better and better and get good at delivering it. And so I've seen that also like on the conference circuit, like folks give the same talk. And then I think another tactic is to take intro courses for things that you think you know really well already. So I think folks are surprised if I think I understand investing really well. And I'd be, if I bought a course because I thought it was interesting, I would want to skip to like the later sections where the meat is. And it's like, slow down and just see how they explain the basics. And every once in a while you see something, you're like, oh, I didn't actually realize that. Or I didn't know that the origin of that was here. Or I didn't know that was pulled from this, where that came from. And I guess a personal story, that helped me understand some of these concepts of like focusing on the basics and going back to the basics. I was at a conference, and actually it was interesting. I was going to do a 40-minute talk, and about a week before they said, can you instead do like a 4-hour workshop? And I was like, I guess, let's go. So I took my talk and I turned it into a workshop, and I had an early slide. It was a business 101 workshop. So it was like folks starting out building a business from scratch. And I talked about some of the stuff that we talked like in the operations section. And I had a slide early on that was like, hey, let's review the stuff you guys already know. Like in business, you want to make money. What is that? That's revenue minus expenses equals profit. Everyone's on board. Cool. Next slide. And when I said next slide, like half the audience was like, wait, what? Go back. Can I write that down? And I was like, whoa, like these folks, like they were good photographers. They were good at selling the things they sold. They were good at tinting windshields. Like there was like a really interesting eclectic group of people with like small businesses. And it was like, but they had never really thought of this stuff. And it actually, you know, they didn't consciously think about even something as that seems as basic to me as like profit and revenue and expenses. And so I was like, slow down. And I went back and, you know, spent some time on that slide.
I remember there's this football coach, I can't remember which one, like some of the great coaches, but he had this thing where the very first day of the very first practice, his very first kind of teaching to the football team was, this is how you tie your shoes.
Yeah.
Like going literally to the very first step. And if you look at the offline world, like a great teacher, let's say in a university, a professor, they may get like a new class of freshmen every year. So they're like kind of physically forced to be reminded, okay, these are freshmen. They're just getting started, and then they can perfect it over time. And also just want to note that the beginner's market is often the biggest market. So if you look at YouTube videos and you know, or if you look at like course sales on Udemy and stuff, like the whatever subject matter 101, like these courses often have the best sales. So if you need motivation to like keep it simple, just remember there's often a lot of revenue potential by not forgetting about the beginners. Let's talk about instructional design. Like, what is it? Why is it important? Because sometimes like a beginner might think, oh, I just need to get on camera, talk about my subject matter expertise. But what you're designing is not just content. You're designing a learning journey. It's not a content dump. We're not putting the Library of Alexandria like in video format and crossing our fingers and hope they figure it out. So it's all about designing a transformational path. So the main ones we see in online education in terms of transformational paths are like, you know, incremental improvements or like big result, big transformation. And some of the top, you know, highest value courses and memberships and communities actually help somebody create a new identity. So think about that. What is the end result? Design for the end result. Do the chunking and work backwards from that end result and create the milestones like we talked about in a previous session. But also think about getting your learners taking action to make the progress, because people need more than just content to learn and make a change. And some of the ways to think about that are, yes, they need some content, they need some core ideas, concepts, strategies, but this is why I'm a big fan of assignments, particularly if you're helping somebody go from A to B, giving them like, okay, we've learned this concepts, now do X, and also maintain beginner's mind. And remember, this may be the first time they're doing that. So get them taking action. Potentially, we'll talk about community later, but perhaps, you know, getting involved in like a social learning aspect, like learning together, can add more richness to the experience. And then as a side note, it is good to also be entertaining. So like a boring teacher that's just blah, 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 here's your homework, make it fun and entertaining. If you look at some of the top performing YouTube channels, they're entertaining as well. There's a term for that. It's called edutainment. We recently, about a year or two ago, at LifterLMS we wanted to focus on a problem of, okay, sometimes people are buying our softwares, but they're not ready. They don't have their course idea. They're kind of doing things out of order, which is a challenge. Like maybe they're buying software, maybe they're studying ads or trying to build an affiliate program, but they don't actually have their course figured out yet. Like, what's it called? Who's it for? What's the syllabus? Maybe start creating that content. So we designed a free mini course called the Course Plan Challenge to help people figure out what topic that they would be best for them to focus on, how to really define their avatar, which we've talked about in a previous session, how to start doing the curriculum design. And so we're kind of getting people ready for the software through training and really just mastering that beginner's mind. So if you think about, this is why fourth dimensional thinking is really important. You're not just providing content in an isolated bubble of time. These people are on a journey. You're hooking into a pain point or an opportunity for a particular person, all the way to them being successful with your program. And what do they need throughout that? Like content, ideas, worksheets. There's a lot of multimedia, which we'll talk about in a little bit, that you can do to kind of make your experience even richer. But yeah, think through time, not just like it's an isolated package that they need to know about.
That Course Plan Challenge course is awesome. So here's a plug for that. I think I definitely have I helped implement it on the website in certain ways, so I had to look at it. That was my first exposure to it, was kind of not taking the course, but just doing stuff. But then afterwards, I referred back to it when I was planning a course of my own, and I bet you probably do too. You almost go back to your own course.
That's a sign.
Planning. Yeah. So it's awesome when you have a piece of content like that. I have a few posts and things that I reference. In the book I wrote about WordPress is one of those too, where it's oh, I don't remember this, but I wrote about it in the book. It's funny.
Yeah.
So yeah, plug for the Course Plan Challenge. That's awesome content. You talked about being entertaining and turning it on. That's tough for me. I remember, I think of the teacher's voice, my kids in elementary school, all the good teachers, they, you're talking to them, they have a normal voice. And then when they're talking to students, man, I would mimic it now, but it's higher pitch and you're oh yeah. And energetic and making it sound exciting. You're talking about the boring thing ever, but it's this is awesome. And it's funny you said that, and then it triggers in my head now, I should turn that on for this. And I don't practice it enough, I think, to have it natural. And I remember thinking about that when I was homeschooling my kids for about a year in COVID. I was the content is good, but I really think the teacher, I don't have the energy they need right now. And I like the idea of taking action too. And I thought I could ask you, because I feel I struggle with this when I'm consuming content. I like to read books, and sometimes reading books at 11 at night before you go to bed, or early in the morning, no one's around. And it's a business book, and I'm that's really good ideas. And it's okay, now take action and do these things before you read the next chapter. And I'm yeah, no, actually later. So I don't know if you have tips for encouraging that, or making folks more likely to take those action and those next steps, or...
I think, just to answer that real quick, that's one of the cool things about a learning management system is you can use things like required assignments, prerequisites, you can't move on.
Go to the next section until you fill it out.
Or drip content, you can't. The next one isn't coming for another week. So to create the space.
So I think the Course Plan Challenge has a very clear, I think it was 6-part layout of start to finish, some of the stuff we're talking about, how to develop the outline and plan for your course. Another method I've seen work with folks is to design a course through content accumulation, and then later strategically curate it. So, the idea here is to produce content, useful content, continuously. And I talked before about E-bomb as a method of that. Whenever you answer a question for someone as an expert, other people have that question, write it down, share it somehow, put it somewhere. It's good to publish it if possible, but even if not, just kind of write down all this content and force yourself to do that and get good. And then at the end, you can organize it into, a structured learning path. You could build it into a course. Some other versions of this are so you have, say, blog posts once a week for a year, you got 52 blog posts. Then you can build these hubs around common concepts or use cases. Or it's often called pillar content from a marketing perspective. So cool, you talked about ones we've done in the past. So I'm thinking we, have membership software. And so we're answering all these questions about the different problems of setting up a membership site and running a site and thinking about pricing, and things like that. And then we build content hubs around common use cases. So we have a hub for course, people who are building like course-like memberships, and people who are building associations, and people who are building video sites, and we aggregate all the content into those hubs. And then what's good when you're building those hubs is you'll realize there's gaps in the content. So when you do that practice of curating the content into a course or a hub or a pillar, you're like, oh, you know what we don't have is, we're trying to have all the content from A to B on this topic. We're actually missing some of the key questions we don't answer, or we link out to someone else's website for that, or we often refer some other tool. And it's like, oh, that's a missing piece that we should write ourselves. So yeah, we did that for Paid Ministers Pro with the use cases. And it was awesome because we've been writing content for years and years and years. And when we put together the hubs, we kind of did it almost for ourselves as like a practice to help us focus on the use cases. And it was something that we could deliver to folks when they sign up. Hey, what use case are you? And then we give them the hub. It's like, here's a better way to like browse through our content. And when we put it together, we were given that as like a freebie add-on to the full membership. And we're like, this is valuable in itself. This feels like more valuable than the software, like the ideas that we've been talking about. So you might find content you're building for some other reason, when you package it together, it becomes valuable and you can put a price tag on it.
Yeah. I think one of the things is like this presentation, these sessions are all about really identifies an aspect of this where when you put your customer at the center of your business and not your product, like you mentioned, oh, this other thing may be more valuable than the software. In my view, what that comes from is, okay, this particular type of customer, in this case, they need technology, which we're going to talk about in another session. And that's what we do. That's what our business is. And we incorporate a lot of the other things we're talking about here, but they need help with all these other things like becoming a teacher, being a subject matter expert, building community, and so on. So you can expand outside of the scope of your core business and just provide more resources to help people even further. And that's just a helpful way to think about it. And like you said, you can sometimes signpost other resources like, oh, well, they really need to figure out this other thing. There's this other expert over here, and just introduce them to another body of work. There's a saying, just because you're on the train, it doesn't mean you have to carry the luggage. So sometimes you can use your depth of knowledge and connections to point people in other areas that are going to support them, that ultimately supports your core business as well. Let's talk about lesson design. People are not robots, and there's variation in personality types, culture, predispositions. In learning, it often comes up and there's like multiple learning styles. So how do you design for that? And there's also consumption styles, like how do people like to consume content or engage in community or get support? Kind of the classic learning style thing is, well, there's visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. Visual people are, they like watching videos. They like seeing like pictures and graphics. Auditory people like to listen. If you listen to podcasts and like a lot, like me, you're probably an auditory person. There's, if you, really nerd out on YouTube, you're probably a visual person. There's also the readers, like people who like to read. I know lots of people who, they really dislike video and they prefer to read. Kinesthetic people, they don't like reading, watching videos, or listening. They're actually really into like the assignment, the get moving, like get action. I just want to start like playing with this software or this movement technique or these art implements and just start. I learn by doing is what kinesthetic is. And then there's the, it's not really attention span, but it's the idea that some people like rip through content and they're just like scanning. And then other people are deep divers, like they read every word, they watch the video really slowly. They they'll like email you and be like, hey, you have a typo here on line 736 about whatever. Like they're very detailed. So when I'm creating content, either for marketing or as part of training, I think about that. Sort of a classic example of that, if I'm doing a video lesson and there's like a big idea and concept and thing, I'll kind of spotlight at the beginning for the scanner people who are going to move really fast and maybe not watch the whole thing, just to kind of give them their quick hit. But then, of course, I'll go into detail and do the whole deep dive for the deep divers. And then the quizzing and assignments aspect, this really helps particularly the assignments help the kinesthetic learners. So like, cool, we have a project here. We're going to do something. So not just creating content for consumption, but think about action. And I really learned about this different learning style, content consumption style, making sure we're taking action and not just consuming information. LifterLMS is an example with our support. I lean more, and many of us, by the way, are, we do all these things, like we scan, we deep dive, we watch, we read, but you're often stronger in one area. Like I think you're more of a reader. Yeah. I'm more of a, video audio guy, but I also know you like video and I also read, but you probably have a primary. It's kind of like a personality type. But when doing support for software like LifterLMS, I realize the biggest mistake we can make is to assume the world is as we are, particularly in a teaching role. If you happen to love videos and all you do is make videos and have a YouTube channel and have video lessons, you're kind of ignoring a large percentage of the population. So we've made a commitment to make technical documentation with a lot of words, a lot of screenshots. We do YouTube tutorials for the video learning folks. We do courses that have more assignments and just mix all the multimedia styles. We do live calls. Some people really like to learn in community. You get into that and people have different types of conversation preferences. I just want to send an email. I want to jump on Zoom. I want to watch your live stream and not have the pressure of being live on a call with you, but I'll be in the comments. And you'll notice people cluster. You'll start seeing the same names in different places. So thinking about that is one way to do that. And even something like a refund policy for a course or membership, that's really for the kinesthetic people. I don't want to read your sales page. I'm just going to buy the thing. And then if I don't like it, I'm going to ask for a refund. We also do trials as a conversion tool. So that's for I don't want to read your sales page. Let me test it out before I buy it. And even in the software itself, there's places, as an example, that oh, here's a video tutorial. Here's a link to technical documentation. The way the course builder works, it kind of encourages people to create different, types of learning content and resources. So it's like personalities. So many personalities in the world. The same thing applies to what the different types of learners, and they may be exactly your same avatar, but they're going to have all that variation in personality.
With the different learning styles and the kind of content types, modalities of making content, I know it puts pressure on folks that they feel like, oh, I have to be a good writer and a good video person and make podcasts. And I have to build, visual displays of this information. But what's good is there's lots of tooling and help you can get with those stages. So I always recommend starting with the modality that you're most comfortable with, and then using that to build things. So an example for myself, I think I'm a reader, I'm a writer. So when I was doing video and trying to do it off the cuff, it's not coming across as well. And it got easier for me when I scripted it, basically, wrote a blog post and then kind of sort of read it as I was doing the video. But that helped me organize my thoughts and figure out what was important to talk about. And some people and actually I've gone in the opposite direction. Sometimes there's a very complicated topic and I don't actually understand it. And I started recording and I ramble with someone on my marketing team and they just ask me questions and they dig deep. And then they get a bunch of content and they're like, okay, I'm going to turn this into a blog post, a written blog post. And there's tooling, like if you made the video, you made a bunch of videos and now you want to make blog posts, you can get the transcripts and run them through something like ChatGPT and say, here's my transcript, write me like a blog post. And you don't want to post that directly, but it gives you like a really good first draft if you're good at making video and not so good at making, writing stuff from scratch. It is so important. I know like on my team, we've had a lot of written content over the years and we try to do more video. And the best version of a YouTube video is like thinking specifically about the YouTube market and how they consume content and how long it is. And it should be visual and not just words, not just a talking head. Like the ideal, most produced videos on YouTube, the ones that do really well are very well thought out. There's kind of an 80-20 there where like I have the blog post. If I film myself talking head reading the blog post, that's better than no video at all. And it's a good starting point. And then you can see if you gain traction. You're like, oh, there's a little bit of traction in this video. We should probably make a better one. So let's encourage folks, start with the modality that you're best with, use that to kind of go into the other media realm. And then, allow yourself to 80-20, like just put something out there that's not perfect. People still appreciate it because they want to listen to it while they're washing their dishes. They can't, read it on the laptop, whatever. Yeah. So another thing that, when I think about building courses and educational material, it's important to focus on a single path learning journey. So you're going from A to B, but there's a bunch of options in the middle. You could, use different tools. And so it helps, especially with the first version of things, to simplify by addressing like one clear path from start to finish. So an example of that, notoriously it was hard for me was I don't think we even have something on our website called the membership handbook, or membership site handbook. We've been doing this for like over 15 years. And it's like day one, I was like, we should have a quote unquote handbook for how to set up a membership site. And we have these content hubs and other things, but there's probably 7 drafts of the membership site handbook. And the thing that killed it every time early on was that there's so many options for like, where do you host your website? Which tool do you use? Our tool, of course. Okay, cool. That's an easy decision. But then it's like, which email tool do you use? How do you build your course if you're building it? And I found the membership handbook, that's gone on. I'm never going to make it. But when I've made similar content, it helps to simplify. It's one path. It's like, so I note the choices, but then make one choice for them. That's the default choice. And it helps to remember your customer avatar when you're doing that, because you're like, oh, who am I talking to? Chris Badgett, is my avatar. You have like this very specific person you're talking to. You can kind of guess which tool they already have or that they're going to know about, and just pick that one, pick the obvious one, or the default one, or the one that you have a partnership with. And yeah, like the path that folks are learning is like membership site handbook. Another problem with that is it's like a vague concept. It's not like, launch your membership site or get your first membership sale or find your first member. Or it's even, we have 6 different use cases. So a handbook for each use case would probably be good. It's too vague. So it's good to, hey, you're taking Chris Badgett, your avatar, from A to B to a very specific outcome, like we talked about. And yeah, eliminating those what ifs. So that's the other thing too. So there's options of tooling and ways you could go about things, but there's also like, almost FAQ style, like, what do you do if this happens? What do you do if this happens? What if your customer you're selling to doesn't have a lot of money? So what if this, what if that? And take note of those. Maybe you even have FAQ sections, but don't let it derail you when you're writing the first draft from A to B. Just, log those what ifs for later and assume it, the ideal situation.
Yeah, I think one way you can kind of litmus test yourself, if the handbook idea, it's getting a little out of hand, getting hard to like figure out what to do next, how to structure. I call this problem in the course industry creating a giant course. So if you find yourself like, oh, this is expanding, this is like 50 or 100 lessons, it's probably getting a little long in the tooth. And it can be really liberating to think about mini courses. So like with Paid Memberships Pro as an example, like a handbook for association sounds easier to create as a separate thing from like a handbook for course creators, a handbook for communities. And so you kind of can separate those out. And if the same trainings are relevant to your avatar, just not all jumbled together, then a membership or course bundle can be used to offer access to that. So you allow a little bit of that choose your own adventure, while also like kind of simplifying the learning experience in each of the mini courses. Let's talk about user experience design. We've talked about learning journeys, but it's really important to think about designing that as like a total user experience and how people learn through time. So, traditional school system starts the elementary all the way up to higher education. And that's a process that can take, years, decades. But so like you kind of get the macro view, but if you really zoom in on the micro view, like just take it one step at a time. And when you kind of chunk things down to lessons, it's good to come up with your own instructional design framework. So here, as an example, we're talking through like topic area and then like a big idea / strategy. And then we get into some tactics. And then we're using story as a way to do like case study learning with examples through story. And then we're also adding in a little conversation, which people learn from. I found it really interesting, the Google's Notebook LM, I think it's called. Like you can give it a resource, and the way you learn is that you have this option to turn it into an AI-generated conversation. People learn by that, and that's what we're doing here. We're having a conversation, react, and so on. But one of the easiest ways like to come up with your instructional design framework is to think of concepts. So like, what are the big ideas? What are the strategies? What are the tactics? And then give people specific actions to take to move forward. And we have a lot more options besides quizzing. Like I'm just going to check. Some people call that a knowledge check to make sure like you got the core ideas. But getting people involved in projects, there's a type of learning called project-based learning. It's not just about theory. This goes back to that idea of different learning styles. Some people do really good with theory and they can kind of extrapolate and figure out how to put it into practice. Other people do better with like, let's get moving in a project and kind of back and reinforce like what the core concepts are. The other thing is designing for what happens when people get stuck, when they fall down. This is the same thing that happens in traditional education where, you have your all-stars, you have your people that are kind of getting left behind, and you have like the average performance. So design through time what kind of resources and support you want to have. That could be like office hours. It could be a contact form like right next to syllabus, so a student could like privately reach out to the instructor. It could be some community aspect, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I heard this phrase once, like surround yourself with help. That's what you want your people to feel like, oh wow, there's this great training, but there's also like all these resources, and there's like a menu of them that can appeal to different personality types and consumption styles. And I was in a training or a coaching program called SaaS Academy, and I thought it was a really cool implementation. There was probably 300 courses in there. There was live coaching training and coaching calls. There were in-person events in big cities around the US 3 times a year. There's a Facebook group. There was, you could just like email the company and get help. So like, it was just like a full featured, robust user experience that had like tons of resources, and people could really choose their own adventure through it, all while driving to the same outcome.
When I think about resources and support and like additional help around like a core, course or learning experience, sometimes there's a lot of different options, and you can kind of copy what you've seen elsewhere or kind of what's been recommended, or some things might seem obvious. But a lot of times it's good to, get the core material out there. And as long as you have a way for your users to get back to you through like, send them an email, ask for feedback, have a contact form, if there's a support, or you dump them into a community where people can chat. Like it's important to get that feedback, and that feedback is they're going to tell you what they needed. There's this kind of trick where you could almost do this too. I actually, now I thought of this, I do this with my kids. I've never done it with, in the context of business, but someone's birthday's coming up and you don't know what to get them. You can pretend like, I just got you like the best thing for your birthday, and you'll never guess what it is. And you're like, actually try it. Like, do you think you know what it is? And they'll guess. And if you keep track of the guesses, you're like, all right, well, here's 3 things that Chris wants for his birthday. So it feels like that kind of thing where if you it'd be interesting to like do that in advance. We're going to have bonuses. Like, you'll never guess what they are. Actually try to guess. And then what people say is like that, they're telling you what they want. And you're like, okay, cool. This person used a core resource, but they need, extra documentation support or video, or they want something else, and you can figure it out. And so, yeah, it's interesting. Like, I think you mentioned designing like the total user experience, and there's different modalities, and having these extra things, tagged onto your content, and that really helps and reinforce and get the outcomes that you want. And it's really important. And I feel like a lot of times I'm like the keep it simple guy, or I see the importance of that. And I also remember all the conversations I've had with folks who feel slowed down by that, or paralyzed by that, or like, I'm never gonna be able to do all that. And so I talked about like, hey, there's different media and modalities that you can produce your content as. Like, pick the one you do the best and focus on that, and make that the core of what you're doing, and make sure you ship that at least. So if you write well, write, and if you're good on camera, do videos, that kind of thing. And as always, like, I think it's good to start small and try to, we've talked in different ways of trying to not make it too complicated, bite off, something you can chew, work on that, do it really well. Publishing early is important. I talked about earlier sessions how there's a difference between like putting the content together and just having it ready for publish, and actually publishing it and putting it out there. You get feedback. There's folks who, I forget, the fellow has a writing course, and he loves Twitter. He's like, I tweet a bunch of random stuff, and whatever tweets get engagement, that's the core idea. I should make sure when I write my book, I actually focus on that. So he wants to write books and share books, but he tweets because he gets a sense of like which of the ideas are hitting his audience the best. So that's a form of publishing, early, like small forms, teasers. You wrote the first lesson, push that out there, see if you can get attention. There's lots of ways to do that. And also not just publish early, but get paid early. If you're trying to make money on these things, there is always a difference of the audience who's willing to consume this but not pay for it, or the person who's paying for it is a different type of customer or user, reader, learner. And so getting money involved in the system like makes it real for yourself and also for the person learning. And you said too, one thing at a time, like step by step. So focus. I think I think about Paid Memberships Pro, and also LifterLMS is this way too, where there's so many features in the core product. There's so many add-ons. There's so many other plugins, third-party plugins you can tie in, other services. And a lot of people come to the software and they see it all and they get excited, and it's like funner for them to like add a forum, add a community, add an email list. It should be drip feed, right? I guess everyone's doing that. And they get overwhelmed, and it's kind of like, whoa, like remember you're trying to help your learner get from point A to point B. Focus on the core, experience and educational content you're producing. Make sure you nail that. And then these things are accessories, they're helpers, they're additional. And definitely it is better to have them, but it's also good to do one at a time so that folks don't feel dispersed. It's kind of like if you start at the same time, like a Slack, a Facebook group, and an online community, like they don't know where to go. It's like only one of those at a time.
Yeah, even like what we're doing here is we're kind of expanding the shelf space to be like hey, there's all these personality types, there's all these different content types, there's all these consumption styles. And so you still, like as an expert, can, kind of research, and we're expanding your mind here. But you don't have to implement everything right away. But the first step is just like kind of awareness that, oh wow, this is more rich and nuanced and detailed, and there's all these options. But then, like you said, shrink it back one step at a time, and don't forget beginner's mind. And some of the most successful people I see with softwares like ours are, they take consistent and perfect action, but they also continuously improve. So this is why, doing a signature course, like one main thing might be a good idea, because it's like when you podcast or you become a YouTuber, there's a saying that your first video is your worst video. So if you're continuously improving, I'm like, all right, it's been a year or whatever, I'm going to remake that course. Or I found that I could better train my learners using this method of like concept, activity, community conversation, whatever it is. I need to retool or supplement that old lesson. So it's not about just moving on or doing too many things at once. I wanted to double click on support systems, because I think this holds a lot of potential and it's poorly understood. And I like to tell a story with this. There's a popular online education platform called Masterclass. I think it's about $19 a month or something like that. And they built a great product there. You can learn from the best in the world and like what amounts to about an hour of training per course. You can learn how to tell jokes from Steve Martin. You can learn business from Sarah Blakely and how to be an entrepreneur and stuff like that. But if you get stuck and you fall down or you have questions, they're not there to interact with you. There's literally zero support. And that's why it's $19 a month. But if you want, there may be somebody who's not as far along as Steve Martin as a comedian, but there may be this other person who teaches stand-up comedy, who you can talk to one-on-one, who will review your bits or your jokes and like give you feedback. So like you may be able to charge that comedy educator may be able to charge $2,000 for the course, for the signature course called Zero to like, improv comedy success or whatever, because they're like really supporting you. And support systems similar to consumption styles and learning styles, there's two layers to this. One layer is, what do you like to do? This is your world. This is your creation. Do you like doing one-on-one coaching? Do you like moderating and holding space for a community? Do you like doing office hours? Like there's all these different ways. Do you like email? Do you like text message? Like some people do support like, hey, unlimited instant message. And there's two vectors of this. And this is actually really detailed out in detail in the course plan challenge to help you think through this. But there's two kinds of support. There's synchronous and asynchronous. So synchronous means I'm helping you in real time together. So that could be a one-on-one call, could be instant messenger. It could be like a group training that you do live. It could be an in-person event. And then asynchronous, some people prefer like, hey, I need time freedom. I don't want my calendar filled up. I want to do things kind of in my own speed. Email support may be better for that. And you have to set expectations. So people are like, hey, I haven't heard from you in 5 minutes. Like you need to set like what your expectations are. Then the other vector is private versus group. So if you do offer one-on-one, like synchronous private coaching support, or you offer one-on-one email support, that takes more time, but it's more valuable. So you can charge a lot more. And you can even have plans on your course or your membership where like, it's like course only $200, course plus group coaching $1,000, course plus private coaching $5,000. So it affects like the value, and just anchoring that to this idea of like masterclass, where it's $20 a month, or it's here and I have your back and we're going to be working together privately. It's $2,000 a month. So figure out both what you want as an individual, because this is your creation, and two, what would be most helpful for your customer avatar. Because, you know, for example, if I was helping somebody or an avatar that had a certain health concern or medical challenge, they may not want any kind of group anything. It's a private thing, and it would not be appropriate to even explore the group options, but maybe it is. It just depends on your avatar. And my pro tip for you is the easiest way to add this, to do it and support your people better, but also to make more money, is to offer what I call Ask Me Anything office hours. So this is a group coaching call. You could do it on, like a webinar platform. You could do it on a YouTube live stream with comments. You could even do it not by face, like, hey, there's a time of day, I'll be in this Slack channel. And you see people do this on Twitter sometimes, like, hey, I'm waiting at the airport, like, ask me anything for the next hour. But the cool thing about the office hours is it's time boxed. So like, let's say it's an hour every week or every 2 weeks or once a month. So you're only committing as a creator to, that time box. It's also scalable. You could have 2 people show up. You could have 200, first come, first serve, or you take the questions in advance and kind of choreograph it a little bit. But that's the quickest way to go from the $20 a month, do DIY self-study training, to actually having some high fidelity support system that doesn't eat your lunch for time, provides a lot of value, also actually creates a little bit of community aspect, because people will be at the office hours and like, oh, that's a great question, even though they didn't come up with it, and then they're learning. So, and that's what we did at LifterLMS too. I realized, selling software, there's a lot of this like automate everything, have a passive, business, but like there was so much demand. You see it in emails and stuff. Can I just get on a call with you? I'm like, well, we don't charge like an arm and a leg for the software. In fact, a lot of it's free. How can I meet this need? Oh, so we introduced the office hours, which happens once a week, and it continues we've been running it for about 5 years.
We used to have consultation calls. So it's like for $300, you could talk to us for an hour about anything. And then some folks are like, I can't afford $300. And then I tried a couple times to be like, all right, I'll help you out. Just let me record it and I can use it for content. And they're like, that's weird. What is so weird? I don't want to do it. But then you're like, that's exactly what the open office hours are. Like, they ask me anything, and it's just a reframing of that. It's such a force multiplier on your time. So we have a version of that now too. It's great. And it's also a good source of, for content. I think, I love it, like all the different, ways you can support someone. And I think something that's important to remember when you're kind of presenting these options and kind of writing sales pages for them and things like that, is to explain like what the common experience is. Like when you submit a ticket, this is what's going to happen. When you get on the call, this is exactly what's going to happen. And even better yet, like testimonials that are like, I had this issue, I talked to Chris for 30 minutes and I totally solved my issue. So that can be, like, it's easy to forget that. You kind of like, hey, we do this, this, and this. And people have like an expectation or some kind of pretense, or like you said, you're in a marketplace of other people solving the same solution, and you're trying to stand out by like delivering a superior support experience. You're like, you got to tell people up front that it's superior and kind of own it. So we had an exercise too, where we revamped our support page, where it's like, we're actually better than everyone, but we're not telling them. So like, let's tell them, tell the person, about to enter our funnel. There's different ways to deliver support. And what you'll find, even if your intention is not to have a new channel for support, everything is support. Any way that someone can talk to you, they will use it for support. I mean, we turned off blog comments on our blog posts a while ago because 90% of them were random support. So it's like, here's a blog post about how to do this thing. And it's like, my comment's not about what you wrote about, but I was wondering how to do this. And I was like, did you not see the like click for support link in the upper right of the page? So yeah, every method is going to be support. So you should decide up front the best way that you support your users and your learners, and how your preferred methods of communication, and then stick to it. So, but it is good still to like allow the support to originate from anywhere organically, because you kind of can't fight it. But funnel it proactively into the channels. So for example, like another funny example, like the support comes out, and I would do these customer conference surveys. So hey, I'm going to call you and I'll ask you some questions for my benefit to learn more about my customer. And when I coach my team is doing this too, is like at least half of them, they're only taking the call because that's the way they know to talk to you on the phone, and they have a support question they're going to ask you. So it's like, try to answer the support thing and then be like, hey, I helped you. Can you help me answer these questions now? But we also, when folks are DMing you on Twitter or contacting you, if it's a quick answer it, but always, even if you answer it quickly, say, the best way to get help is to go through the proper channel. The fastest way to get help is to go through the proper channel. Something I use now because I have a team is like, I'm not actually the best person to answer this question. I know I seem like it is because I'm kind of the face of the company. The team is experts and they know this better than I do. So every time you redirect support, kind of include that. The other thing to know about this when, doing support is that exceptions become the expectations. So an example of that is we do technical support through our ticketing system on the website, and we don't do support on the weekends because our team's working Monday through Friday. And sometimes the team is like, I'm not doing anything. I really care about this person's project. I'm going to go above and beyond and help them on the weekends. Like, cause they just can't help it. They're like, oh, there's a problem in my head. And so they give the feedback on the weekend, and that's okay to do in extreme cases or sometimes, but every time you do that, that person just learned, oh, actually they do support on the weekends, and, or they do support through Twitter. I mean, this is like a cliche. Twitter is like, you call the phone system. Can you help me with my purchase? I want a refund. No, you can't do it, blah, blah, blah. And then you just yell on Twitter, and then they DM you and say, how can I help you? And then all of a sudden you're magically like talking to the C-suite, and they're going to reverse everything for you. So yeah, if you make these exceptions, like, people learn about them.
90 or like, let's say 80-20, 80%, like, yes, you do need to reinforce boundaries. And actually, but on the other side, sometimes if they do get through or you make an exception, I learned this concept from you. I was already kind of doing it, but I didn't have a name for it. You call it a make my day.
Yeah.
So every now and then someone will reach out to you through the wrong channel, or even you might see them struggling, like in a social community or wherever. And you're like, man, I could really help this person. They're being so nice. They've already like sent in a testimonial or whatever. And either you help them off channel, like, and just over deliver. And then, or like you actually seek them out and you're like, hey, I saw in this group this happening. We don't normally do this, but I really appreciate what you've done in our community and we really want to help you. And then you call it a make my day thing. So that's something fun you can do as a creator. And the crazy thing with that kind of thing is sometimes then that person, will upgrade to your bigger offer, or if they haven't written a testimonial, they will, they tell your friends, they become an affiliate or whatever. So it's this weird dichotomy of like maintain boundaries, but also like break the rules and over deliver.
And the important part of that is to do it consciously instead of reactively. And forget where I got that from. It's because it's funny, maybe it wasn't that good for it, but I think the company went out of business. It was like a department store, either like Neiman Marcus or one of those types, like a big department store. And they used to give their sales team a budget of like $1,000 a month to like make the day. So you'd be in to buy shoes, and it's an expensive, high value department store, but you buy like $200 worth of shoes. And if you said you were hungry, the person could like tap into their budget and like go buy you food so you could eat the food while you're trying on shoes or something like crazy that doesn't usually happen in a department store. And sometimes they would spend more like taking care of you than they would. And that was part of like their core values and how they did so. But it also was probably like a marketing budget item. Like that money didn't come out of the support budget. It came out like, this is marketing, and we hope that person goes on to say things. And I feel like Scrooge or like the Scrooge over here, like, bah, humbug, don't help people. But in reality, if you you scale a product and you have hundreds of folks, you can give this level of care to every customer. So it's good to do it selectively. And when we do that, kind of make your day. We have time. It's a customer that's interesting or like matches our values, or we have some idea that they're a sneezer who's going to talk about it or be nice. It can be a good story and that kind of thing. Or sometimes it's a technical challenge. Like we actually have this challenge where I'm curious to figure out, like, cool, I've never used that email marketing tool. Let's figure it out for them. Yeah, so that's great. Yeah. When to bend the rules.
And the last thing I'll say on this support thing is you may just have a pricing problem. It's notorious in our industry that people underprice. This is part of the expert's curse. You're so close to it. You know all the stuff. You've kind of undervalued what you do, or maybe you have some imposter syndrome going. So if you're kind of like, well, I don't want to do, unlimited email support because my course is $200. It's really well done. They should just follow the steps and do the exercises. Yeah, but if it was $1,000, would you answer an email from them twice a week and give them that access? And there will be some people that like, quote, abuse that.
Yeah.
You're getting like 5 emails a day, but there'll also be like these tons of people who are like, I don't really need help. It's included as a benefit of the bundle. And then there'll be kind of like the average, which is how I kind of get to like that 2 emails a week. Is that worth an extra $800 a month to you? So always think about pricing when it comes to support, and it might change your mind on what type of support you want to do and how much and all that.
Yeah. It's good to be flexible because like, hey, this is how we do things. People keep trying to do support on Facebook or whatever. And every time that happens, that's an indication that people really want to communicate that way, and you should consider, or they want a phone call. And every time they ask and you say, we don't do phone calls, it's like a mental note. Maybe we should figure out how we can do phone calls. We can make money off this.
Yeah. And you don't have to necessarily change your pricing. You could just add one more plan that has that level where the cost benefit analysis makes sense.
So many options. It's great.
And that's a wrap for this episode of LMS Cast. Did you enjoy that episode? Tell your friends and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. And I've got a gift for you over at LifterLMS.com/gift. Go to LifterLMS.com/gift. Keep learning, keep taking action, and I'll see you in the next episode.